I was assembling our newborn's crib when I heard voices from the kitchen. What my wife told her mother that day destroyed our marriage, but saved my future. At 42, while assembling my newborn son's crib, I heard my wife tell her mother something that shattered my world. I don't love him. Never did. He's just a paycheck with hands. What happened next changed everything I believed about love, family, and the masks people wear. If you've lived long enough, you know that moment when reality crashes through your carefully constructed life like a wrecking ball through glass. Mine came on a Saturday afternoon in October, surrounded by the innocent chaos of baby furniture parts and the devastating clarity of overheard truth. Let me take you back to where this all began. My name is Christopher, and I'm a 42-year-old mechanical engineer living what I thought was the American dream in suburban Phoenix. For 12 years, I'd been married to Rebecca, a 38-year-old administrative coordinator who brought her daughter Emma into our lives when she was just 6 years old. Emma was now 17, and I'd raised her as my own daughter through soccer practices, homework struggles, first heartbreaks, and college applications. 3 weeks before the moment that changed everything, we were expecting our first child together, a son we planned to name Jacob. The nursery was painted a soft blue, the changing table assembled with military precision, and our savings account showed the comfortable cushion of two responsible adults planning for their future. I earned around $68,000 annually at an aerospace company, while Rebecca brought in $32,000 from her position at a medical billing firm. We weren't wealthy, but we were stable, happy, and ready to welcome Jacob into what I believed was a loving family. That Saturday, I was in our two-car garage, wrestling with what appeared to be the most complex piece of furniture ever designed by human hands. The crib from Target came with approximately 457 parts, screws that seemed to multiply when I wasn't looking, and instructions that read like they'd been translated from ancient hieroglyphics by someone who'd never actually seen a crib. I'd been at it for nearly 3 hours, my Honda Civic pushed to one side to make room for this domestic battlefield. The autumn air was crisp, so I'd left the garage door cracked open about 18 inches for ventilation. Our kitchen window sits directly above the garage, and through that gap, voices drifted down like autumn leaves, casual and conversational. At first, it was just background noise, Rebecca's voice mixing with her mother Patricia's, Emma chiming in occasionally with teenage commentary. Normal family chatter, while the menfolk handled the heavy lifting. I was in that focus zone where your hands work independently of your brain, sorting screws and checking diagrams while your mind wanders to baby names and college funds. Then I heard my name, and something primal in every human being makes you stop and listen when your identity floats through conversation you're not part of. What I heard next didn't just stop my hands, it stopped my heart. Rebecca was telling Patricia about her pregnancy stress, which seemed normal enough. Every expectant mother worries. But then her voice took on a tone I'd never heard before, casual and cold, like she was discussing the weather or grocery lists. The baby's coming soon, and Christopher's been so clingy lately, getting on my nerves with all his excitement about becoming a dad. Patricia's response came without hesitation, without surprise, like they'd discussed this before. Well, honey, you know what we've always said. He's reliable, I'll give him that. Reliable, Rebecca laughed, and the sound was like ice cracking. That's one way to put it. Truth is, Mom, I don't love him. Never really did. He's just a paycheck with hands, if we're being honest. The drill in my hand became impossibly heavy. Time stretched like taffy, each second lasting hours as Patricia's voice drifted down with the casual cruelty of small talk. We've discussed this, sweetheart. You play the game until Jacob's born, and you feel secure. Then we'll work on getting custody when Christopher inevitably breaks down. Men like him always do when the pressure gets too real. But it was Emma's voice that delivered the final blow. My daughter, who I'd taught to drive, who had walked to her first day of high school, who still sometimes called me dad when she thought no one was listening. Can I spit in his food tonight? Like, just once? It would be so satisfying. The garage fell silent, except for the sound of my own breathing, which had become shallow and rapid. I kept drilling, kept moving, kept assembling that crib for my son, while my marriage disintegrated in real time above my head. My hands worked on autopilot, while my mind reeled through 12 years of memories, searching for signs I'd missed, clues I'd been too blind or too trusting to see. When I finally came inside 2 hours later, they were all smiles and Sunday afternoon warmth. Rebecca asked if I wanted some leftover pasta. Emma showed me a funny video on her phone. Patricia complimented my work on the crib. The normalcy was suffocating, knowing what I now knew about how they really saw me. That night, I lay next to Rebecca as she slept peacefully, one hand resting on her belly where my son was growing, and I felt like I was drowning in my own bed. Every kiss goodnight for 12 years. Every "I love you" exchanged over morning coffee. Every family photo where we looked happy. All of it felt like elaborate theater, and I'd been the only one who didn't know I was acting. For the next 8 days, I lived in a strange twilight zone of pretending everything was normal while quietly documenting a life I was preparing to leave behind. I'd kiss Rebecca goodbye each morning, help Emma with her calculus homework each evening, and feel my heart breaking a little more with each interaction. The signs, once I started looking, were everywhere. Rebecca insisting we keep separate checking accounts for independence. The way conversations stopped when I entered rooms. How she'd started working late more frequently, though when I checked our shared Google photos, I found pictures of her at restaurants with friends on nights she claimed to be stuck at the office. I discovered she'd been transferring small amounts, 60 here, 80 there, to a savings account I didn't know existed. Her Amazon purchase history, which we shared, showed baby items being delivered to Patricia's house. Items I hadn't chosen, hadn't even known we needed. The most devastating revelation came when I went through our text message history. So many nights she'd told me she was working late turned out to be girls' nights out. Nothing that proved infidelity, but plenty that proved deception, that proved I was living with someone who found it effortless to lie to my face day after day. I started carrying a small digital recorder in my shirt pocket, and over the next week, I captured conversation after conversation that confirmed what I'd heard that first day. Rebecca complaining to Patricia about how I wanted to be too involved with the baby. Patricia strategizing about custody arrangements. Emma making casual comments about how I was annoying when I tried to spend time with her. By the end of that week, I'd consulted with a family law attorney named David Martinez, paying him $6,000 for advice that potentially saved my future relationship with my son. I learned about Arizona's custody laws, about the importance of establishing paternity, about how to protect myself financially and legally. I opened a separate checking account at a different bank and started redirecting a portion of my direct deposit there. Not enough that Rebecca would notice the main account changing, but enough to build a foundation for whatever came next. I found a modest 2-bedroom apartment across town and paid 3 months' rent in advance. Most importantly, I started documenting everything related to Jacob. Every doctor's appointment I attended, every piece of baby furniture I assembled, every conversation about our son's future. I photographed receipts for everything I purchased for him, kept detailed records of my involvement in preparing for his arrival. The hardest part wasn't the planning or the legal maneuvering. It was continuing to love and care for people who saw me as nothing more than a resource to be used up and discarded. Sitting across from Emma at dinner, helping her with college application essays, while knowing she'd been asking permission to literally spit in my food. Rubbing Rebecca's feet when they were swollen from pregnancy, while knowing she was counting down the days until she could take my son and disappear into a custody arrangement designed to minimize my role in his life. Jacob was born on a Tuesday morning in November, 3 weeks earlier than expected but healthy at 6 pounds, 12 ounces. I cut his umbilical cord with tears streaming down my face, though Rebecca and the nurses probably assumed they were tears of joy rather than the complex mixture of love for my son and heartbreak over the mother who would use him as a weapon against me. The hospital experience was surreal beyond description. Holding this tiny human who was half me and half someone who'd been plotting against me for months. Looking into Jacob's eyes and promising him silently that I would fight for him, that I wouldn't let their plan succeed, that he would know his father loved him no matter what legal battles lay ahead. For 2 months after we brought Jacob home, I lived this double life of new father by day and strategic planner by night. I got up for every 3 a.m. feeding, changed countless diapers, assembled more baby gear, all while documenting everything and slowly moving my personal items to the apartment they didn't know existed. The most disturbing development came during Jacob's second week home. I'd installed a small security camera in our kitchen after what I'd overheard, hidden behind some cookbooks where it could capture the counter area. On a Thursday morning, while reviewing the footage from the night before, I watched Emma approach my coffee mug, look directly toward where she thought I was in the living room, and spit into it before stirring it with a satisfied smirk. This wasn't a teenager having a bad day or acting out. This was calculated cruelty from someone I'd raised for 11 years. Someone who'd fallen asleep in my arms during countless movie nights. Someone I'd taught to parallel park and help through her first heartbreak. Rebecca and Patricia had grown bolder since Jacob's arrival, excluding me from decisions about feeding schedules and medical appointments. Patricia suggested they should take Jacob for a weekend at her place to give me a break. When I politely declined, Rebecca accused me of being possessive and controlling. The gaslighting became constant and exhausting. Rebecca would watch me change Jacob's diaper, then tell her mother on the phone that I never helped with childcare. I'd cook dinner for the family, and she'd complain to Emma that I expected her to be grateful for basic household contributions. Meanwhile, Rebecca's social media painted a picture of the perfect family. Photos of the three of us with Jacob, captions about what an amazing father I was, comments from friends and family congratulating us on our beautiful family. The disconnect between public perception and private reality was dizzying. My attorney had been building our case methodically, and by January, we had everything we needed. Recordings of the original conversation and several follow-ups. Evidence of Rebecca's secret financial planning. Documentation of my extensive involvement in Jacob's care. Video evidence of Emma's disturbing behavior. The moment I'd been planning for months finally arrived on a Saturday in late January. Rebecca, Patricia, and Emma were going shopping for Emma's 18th birthday, planning to spend the entire day at the outlet mall, followed by lunch and manicures. A girl's day out that would give me the window I needed. I waited until their car disappeared around the corner, then spent the next hour loading Jacob's portable crib, enough baby supplies for several days, and the last of my personal belongings into my car. I even took our golden retriever, Max, who'd been coming to doggy daycare more frequently as I prepared him for the transition. Before leaving, I placed a single sheet of paper on Rebecca's pillow. Not explanations or accusations, just a screenshot from the security camera showing Emma spitting in my coffee, with a note that said, "I heard everything that day in October. My attorney will be in touch." The apartment I'd prepared felt like a sanctuary after months of living in enemy territory. Jacob's crib fit perfectly in the second bedroom, and Max immediately claimed the sunny spot by the living room window. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling like I was suffocating in deception. I turned off my phone for 24 hours, knowing that when I turned it back on, the storm would begin. When I finally powered it up, there were 93 missed calls and over 200 text messages. The progression was predictable: confusion, anger, panic, bargaining, and finally desperate pleading. Rebecca's first messages were furious demands to know where I was and accusations that I'd kidnapped Jacob. Patricia's texts were filled with legal threats and outrage about the security camera. Emma's messages started with defiant anger, but quickly shifted to hurt confusion when she realized the extent of what I'd overheard and documented. My attorney contacted Rebecca the following Monday with divorce papers and a proposed custody arrangement. 50-50 split to start, with detailed evidence supporting my position as Jacob's primary caregiver during his first months of life. That's when Rebecca and Patricia showed up at my apartment, somehow having tracked down my address. When I opened the door with Jacob in my arms, the shock on their faces was almost worth the previous months of emotional torture. Rebecca looked like she hadn't slept or showered since I'd left, still wearing the clothes from their shopping trip. Patricia appeared to have aged 5 years in 3 days. I gave them 15 minutes to talk, with the understanding that if they raised their voices once around Jacob, they would leave immediately. The conversation that followed was a masterclass in manipulation, denial, and attempted emotional blackmail. Rebecca swore she hadn't meant what she said that day in October, that pregnancy hormones had made her say terrible things she didn't believe. She claimed Patricia had influenced her, that she'd been feeling overwhelmed and had vented in ways that didn't reflect her true feelings. She insisted she loved me and couldn't believe I would steal our son over a misunderstanding. Patricia tried multiple approaches: disappointment in my character, threats of legal action, offers of financial support if I'd come home, and finally desperate attempts to hold Jacob. When I refused to let her touch him, the mask slipped completely, and her true feelings about my role in the family became crystal clear. I ended the conversation by playing the audio recordings on my phone. Listening to their own voices plotting my emotional destruction and Jacob's custody arrangement, hearing Emma ask permission to contaminate my food, watching them realize that I had documented evidence of months of deception. Rebecca collapsed into sobbing so intense she could barely breathe. Patricia fell silent in that dangerous way that means someone has realized they've completely lost control of a situation they thought they were managing. After they left, I felt emotionally drained but strangely peaceful. For the first time in months, I wasn't wondering what people really thought about me when I left the room. I wasn't questioning whether the love I felt from my family was genuine. I was simply a father taking care of his son in a home where honesty was possible. The legal proceedings moved faster than expected. My attorney presented our evidence methodically, and Rebecca's lawyer struggled to counter the recordings, financial documentation, and proof of my extensive involvement in Jacob's care. The judge wasn't impressed with arguments that I had set them up by recording conversations in my own home, especially given Arizona's single-party consent laws. The final custody arrangement exceeded my hopes. Primary physical custody to me, with Rebecca getting every other weekend and one evening visit per week. Child support from her to me, which carried a certain poetic justice given her paycheck with Hans' comment. She was forced to sell the house and move in with Patricia when she couldn't afford the mortgage payments alone. That was 6 months ago, and life has settled into a routine that feels sustainable and honest. Jacob is now 8 months old, babbling constantly and starting to pull himself up on furniture. He's got my stubborn chin and Rebecca's green eyes, and watching him discover the world fills me with hope for both our futures. I found a better apartment with a small yard for Max and joined a single father support group that meets every Saturday at a local park. Turns out, I'm not the only man who discovered his wife saw him primarily as a financial resource rather than a life partner. The stories these guys share would shock you, but there's healing in knowing you're not alone in experiences that feel uniquely devastating. Rebecca has become a more attentive mother during her limited time with Jacob, showing up promptly for every visit and texting regularly to check on his development during her off days. Maybe losing custody was the wake-up call she needed, or maybe she's simply making the best of a situation that didn't go according to her original plan. Patricia still sends passive-aggressive gifts for Jacob with notes about how he should be with his mommy full-time. They go into a box I'm saving for when he's old enough to ask questions about why his parents don't live together. He deserves honest answers, not the sanitized version they'll undoubtedly try to present. Emma and I haven't spoken since the day I left. She sent a few text messages in the weeks afterward, claiming she was sorry and asking if we could rebuild our relationship. But every time I started to soften, I remembered her face as she spit in my coffee. The casual cruelty of someone who'd shared 11 years of my life asking permission to literally contaminate my food as payment for everything I'd given her. Last month, at a custody exchange, Rebecca asked if we could try again. She said she'd realized what she'd lost, that therapy had helped her understand her mistakes, that she did love me but hadn't known how to show it properly. I looked at her holding our son, thought about the peace I'd found in my small apartment where no one questions my worth or plots my downfall, and told her no. The expression on her face when she realized I meant it, that I wasn't negotiating or playing hard to get, was the moment I finally felt completely free from the life we'd built on foundations of deception. Jacob's first birthday is next week, and I'm planning a small celebration with a few friends from work in the Single Fathers group. Rebecca will have her own time with him the following day. We're not friends, we're not enemies, we're simply two people trying to raise a child without damaging him in the process. This isn't the life I planned when I was assembling that crib 18 months ago, but maybe it's the life I needed. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is discovering the truth about people you thought you knew, even when that truth breaks your heart. If you've made it this far in my story, you probably recognize something familiar in the experience of loving people who don't love you back the same way, of building a life with someone who sees you differently than you see them. Maybe you felt that moment when reality crashes through your assumptions about the people closest to you. What I've learned is that authentic love requires authentic knowledge of who people really are, not who we hope they are or who they pretend to be. It's better to face difficult truths than to live comfortably in beautiful lies. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and your children is to insist on relationships built on honesty rather than convenience. 3 decades of life experience taught me that people will show you who they really are if you pay attention long enough. The question isn't whether those moments of revelation will come, but whether you'll have the courage to believe what you see and act accordingly when they do. Jacob is napping as I finish this story, and in a few minutes, I'll wake him up for his afternoon bottle. He'll smile when he sees me, not because I provide financial security or household stability, but because I'm his dad who loves him unconditionally. That's a relationship built on something more solid than paychecks or convenience, and it's worth every difficult step it took to protect it. Sometimes the most profound gift life gives you is the opportunity to discover who you really are when everything you thought you knew falls apart. That moment in the garage didn't just end my marriage. It began my journey toward becoming the father and man I was meant to be all along.